So do you think we've got the terminology or the concept of stress all wrong?
Mm, absolutely, man. And I know that you know this when you ask that question. I know that you know this, but stress is so good for us. Adrenaline, cortisol, these things bolster immune function, improve our focus, allow us to be in an energized state, allow us to upregulate these body systems so that we can expend energy to meet challenge, demand, and, a busy life. The problem is not the stress. The problem is the absence of disciplined, intermittent recovery. And we are addicted to stress. That's the thing is like, you think when you find a void in your day, when you find a quiet space, what do you do? Do you sit there? Do you allow yourself to get bored? Do you allow your mind to wander off onto ideas and bring them in and then articulate them with your creative mind? Or do you pick your phone up? Or do you search for some sort of stimulus? The brain is just addicted. Our brains are addicted to stimulus. A big part of this is secondary to the phone, high resolution imagery. We're training a pattern of multitasking. This here, scrolling through the phone, is training a pattern of multitasking. And then, you know, over time, what that does is it steals your focus. And everything you've ever enjoyed in life is when you've been present and focused on what you're doing. I think we have the big problem with people who, in whatever they're doing, they can't be present or focused because they're so used to multitasking and they're impacted by the effects of chronic stress, which is mentally agitated.
This is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, actually, is this kind of art of boredom that we have lost. And I actually, the reason I brought this sort of to the forefront of my mind was because I had an issue with an athlete I'm working with, and he was really anxious. He has been really anxious in his training, and definitely beats himself up a lot. There's tons of stress around what he's doing, comes from a pretty good school. There's a lot of pressures, things like that. And he's seeking high performance. He is a perfectionist. He does want everything to be at such a high standard. But I couldn't quite figure out that he was having we put him in a stressful training session. I gave the instructions to his cricket coach. I was like, make his session chaos. Just make it so that it's really challenging, and then we'll sort of see how it goes after. And we'd bolstered it with a bunch of sort of prompts and stuff to make sure he was safe and able to do the session. But it came out and he thought the world had ended. Like, I'm no good. I'm done. The game's no good. And it was chronically, this stress had just gone through the roof, and anxiety was just flaring up. So then I quizzed him a little bit on what he'd done after the session, and he did three things. First thing he did was he would text the coach straight after the session. Now, he would text him straight after the session, which is probably, it was just riddled with negative self-talk and all the things that went wrong in the session. Second was he spoke to his mum on what he wanted to and how the session went. Again, probably highly negative. And then thirdly, he opened up his phone and he scrolled and he went on social media. And then I was thinking about it and I thought, he's a bit of a happiness junkie. He is just seeking dopamine all the time. And what he didn't allow himself to do was to sit and stew in boredom and allow those emotions to sort of dwell in his mind for him to then process them and then be able to unpack them and understand them. But he just blocked them away from his life because he just instantly got on the phone, gave himself that dopamine hit, got scrolling, had some form of dopamine hit, and he neglected the stress that was the one thing that he needed in order to get the outcome that he ultimately wants, which is to be able to deal with this type of stress moving forward and be capable. So for me, it was just a really obvious example of how these devices are just genuinely getting in a way from a mechanism point of view of being able to even deal with the stress, because you're just providing some other stimulus that doesn't allow you to even understand it or process it.
Yeah, it's it's a problem. But what you're talking about there is someone who is in a very reactive state, and often that is secondary to nervous system dysregulation. So spending too much time in that red part of the nervous system, that sympathetic part of the nervous system, which is designed for survival, right? And this is easy for athletes to do because they're hyper-focused on the sport. They tend to overtrain. They're constantly thinking about game day. And then, so it's easy to get get stuck in that red, which is a reactive state. So then when these things are happening, you're not responding, you're reacting. And responding requires taking a step back and having more self-awareness and being, self-reflective. And it's interesting what you said about, reward, messaging the coach. What he's probably looking for, like some form of, feedback in terms of, no, and it's the same with messaging his mum. And then the reward of being on the phone is the dopamine hit. So it is, I was at the airport about 4 months ago, and there's a basketball team, elite level basketball team, and I sat there and I watched them, and they were all sitting around together, and we waited for the plane. I sat there for about an hour reading my book, and I barely saw one of them look up in 1 hour, and I'm like, how is that impacting their ability to focus and be present as individuals, but also as a team? I worked with an athlete recently who was having huge difficulties within a game. When he'd make a mistake, he couldn't let it go. He was bringing it into the next play. He was hyper-focusing on it. There was a whole lot of other issues, but I said to him, what is your daily screen time? And it was upwards of 7 hours a day.
That just is such an obvious thing that's happening. And I actually saw this out at dinner the other day, just a group of lads who were sitting down. They all sat down. It's like, oh, this group have come to enjoy a nice meal together. And then as they sat down, they all got their phones out, and it was about 10 of them. And I thought, why are you here? Like, honestly, what are you doing here?
The reality is, like, man, the same thing happened to me the other day. I was watching, I was looking, and I was getting pissed off, and then I realized I do the same thing. I'm in the same boat, and so I'm looking at these guys going, far out, man. They're sitting there on their phone. I do the same thing, and it's a huge. I've identified it as a problem, and so I have like strict, rules and regulations around like my social media and my phone use, and it's made a massive difference in terms of my energy, my focus, my productivity, my sleep. Because that thing is, like you're on that 4 to 6 hours a day. It's like watching 4 to 5 movies. The amount of, you're feeding so much stimulus through your brain. Your brain's going, right, what do I do with this information? Do we put it in the short-term memory, the long-term memory? Do I tie emotion to it and trap into the limbic system of our brain? It's overwhelming. And it's like, what I remind people is our genius zone is our ability to focus, but we have stolen focus because we're putting out so much of our attention into this device.
If you enjoyed that episode with Dave and you want to enjoy even more episodes of the podcast, then we've put together a playlist where you can get started right away. All you got to do is click right here. Go on, go.